Good afternoon to all from the editorial board of BuildUp portal. For the ones who are attending a BuildUp webinar for the first time, welcome. For our returning audience, thank you for renovating your interest. Before starting with today's presentation, I would like to briefly explain what is BuildUp. BuildUp is an European collaborative platform in the field of energy efficiency in buildings. It is continuously updated and it represents one of the key sources of information on the topic of energy efficiency. You can register and become a member of the community, and you can also upload news, events, present a case study, results from a project, and so on. I would like to invite you all to navigate the portal. In the Learn section, you'll find all the podcasts of the past webinars, so it is possible to listen to all the previous presentations. At the end of this webinar, the link to the full presentations and the file to the PDF presentation will be made available in this section of the portal. It is a pleasure to host today's webinar entitled Putting European Green Deal in Action, Upscaling Sustainable Home Renovation with Innovative Financing Tools, which is organized in collaboration with EuroPACE and RenOnBill projects. I would like to invite you all to participate in this webinar. You can ask questions by typing in the box on the right side of the screen. They will be answered at the end after the presentations. So thank you for your attention. Now I leave the floor to Jessica Glicker. Enjoy.
Hi, and thank you all for joining this afternoon, and thank you BuildUp for hosting the webinar. We're excited to be able to talk about some of our projects, so the EuroPACE project and the RenOnBill project. I'll start off with a bit of an introduction to the speakers and a bit of background information. So as mentioned, I'm Jessie Glicker. I'm from Buildings Performance Institute Europe. I'll be moderating the webinar today. We also have Adriana from Criara Energy Experts. She'll be talking a bit about the RenOnBill project. And then we have Christina Kumovic from Janney Finance, who will be giving us an overview of the EuroPACE project. They will introduce themselves a bit more when they start their presentations. So today's agenda, we'll try to stick to time as much as possible and make sure there's enough time for Q&A at the end. As mentioned, all of this will be recorded and available after the webinar is over, along with the slides. So we'll do a brief introduction, then we will head into the RenOnBill project, then EuroPACE, and then questions. So first, a bit of policy background. Here's a brief overview of the main European level legislation that in some form has an impact on financing for home renovation in the near term. Of course, the most overarching legislation regarding energy efficiency is the Energy Efficiency Directive, which is the driver for a lot of the other legislation and targets that member states are working toward. The Energy Savings Obligation, the EED Article 7, is one of the cornerstones of the EU energy efficiency policy. It requires member states to save annually a certain amount of energy by establishing an energy efficiency obligation scheme or by adopting alternate measures that achieve the same effect. If member states choose the first option, the obligated parties under the scheme, for example, energy companies, will need to achieve the required savings by implementing energy efficiency measures mainly on their customers' premises, for example, through building renovation or switching to more efficient lighting. If member states choose the second option, they must put in place measures such as financing schemes, fiscal incentives, and other energy or carbon taxes to achieve the required amount of savings. A combination of the two is possible, and this is where the innovative financing models, as we will discuss, will come into play. So really the webinar is to look at certain solutions. And then of course there's the Energy Performance Buildings Directive, and specifically under the EPBD, member states must prepare long-term renovation strategies. On a high level, these strategies include measures that help determine where targeted solutions for home renovation are most necessary. For example, the long-term renovation strategies must include an overview of the national building stock and the expected share of renovated buildings in 2020, which will help determine a benchmark and a starting point. They also must identify measures. It's another important requirement for national long-term renovation strategies. So understanding innovative methods, as we will discuss, will continue to contribute to the long-term renovation strategies to help reach national targets. And then we have the European Green Deal. So while we don't have any concrete legislation stemming from the EU Green Deal yet, we know that the renovation wave will be a large component, and financing measures are essential for reaching any goals that will be included in the renovation wave or the EU Green Deal. Therefore, while it's currently not pressing, it is important to take note and track the future developments coming in the Green Deal. So that's a little overview of the policy landscape that we're working in currently. And then a bit of the current renovation situation. So this is based on the European Commission Building Stock Observatory. It provides a high-level look at the status of energy performance certificates among member states. So as member states continue to submit their current long-term renovation strategies, which were due last month, but of course, for obvious reasons have been delayed. So there's about 5 or 6 states that have submitted their long-term renovation strategies with updates on where their building stock currently stands. There will be a clearer picture of which buildings to target and where and how to target those solutions. So this graph clearly depicts that there's a great need to renovate in the residential sector, and innovative and new financing tools will be an essential part of accomplishing this. So there's a lot of red on here, so we really need to work to make some more green and light green. So for financing home renovation, these are some of the most obvious and well-known barriers to financing energy efficiency. Often available financial resources are not exploited to the full extent due to a lack of capacity and trust on the side of potential beneficiaries. Homeowners as well as public authorities often lack information on available funding options or the resources and knowledge to apply for financing schemes. In the case of public buildings and small municipal authorities, there's hardly a central agency responsible for product development tender procedures that has an overview of funding possibilities. And additionally, there's a lack of trust in energy efficiency improvements and in the multiple benefits of building renovations. So we can work toward addressing some of these main barriers. And I think today the projects that we're going to present will definitely address some of these issues. So to provide a bit of an overview of what we'll be discussing today, we'll be talking primarily about on-bill financing and home-based financing projects. Of course, there are variations of these schemes, such as on-bill repayment and tariffed on-bill, but we'll be focusing on on-bill refinancing and home-based financing, and we'll get more into the details in the next 2 presentations. So currently there are several existing programs around the world for on-bill financing and on-bill repayment. This is just a snapshot of some of the most common on-tax financing programs globally. To date, the majority have been in the US and Canada, and we'll discuss that shortly. And the most well-known program is arguably the US Property Assessed Clean Energy PACE program, which started in the US and has expanded globally. And we'll definitely hear more about that in the EuroPACE section of the webinar. Oh, sorry. So as I mentioned, the PACE program, which started in the US, is probably one of the best known on-tax programs. It is in there are more than 50 PACE programs in the United States, programs that are active, programs that are under development, and programs that are ready, PACE enabled, or states that are PACE enabled and ready for the PACE program. So it is being quite successful, and nice transition. And to date, it's really leveraged quite a lot of finance. There are several 100,000 homes that have received PACE upgrades, and it has created quite a lot of jobs and has been quite successful in the United States. So that said, it is growing outside of the United States, the PACE program, and it is, as we'll hear, there's also the EuroPACE program, which is stemmed from the PACE project. Christina will tell us more about that. And there are many projects on several other continents based on the PACE program. So we're really seeing how these on-bill financing programs and on-tax financing programs are extending outside of the United States, and what conditions are right for having such financing programs. And with that, I will turn it over to our speakers. And first we'll have Adriana with RenOnBill.
Hello, everybody, and thank you, Jessica, for your introduction. My name is Adriana, and I will give you a brief overview about the RenOnBill schemes as an innovative way of financing energy efficiency projects. And specifically, I'll be talking to this project, RenOnBill, which has been financed by the European Commission and is currently under implementation. So my presentation will go through these 5 main parts. First, a brief overview regarding RenOnBill project. Then I would like to provide you with some basics about RenOnBill schemes. And the second part of the presentation will be for presenting some first results of the project, such as the key challenges to energy renovation, the potential for energy renovation, to end presenting other benefits beyond energy and economic savings. So, which is the goal of RenOnBill as a project? RenOnBill promotes the development and implementation of RenOnBill schemes in Europe, aiming to accelerate the rate of deep renovation in residential buildings. The way to do that is using these RenOnBill schemes. RenOnBill schemes help by bringing the upfront costs of the energy efficiency improvements down to zero, adding a periodical line item to the customer's utility bill. By this means, the utility bill works as a repayment vehicle, and the end user will not have to bear a higher cost in his energy bill. The assumption of this project is that the agents as the utilities, energy utilities, and the financial agents will work together to make this happen. RenOnBill project, as I said before, is financed by the European Commission through a small and medium enterprises agency. It is being implemented in 4 countries, 4 focus countries at the same time. The countries that you see here highlighted in the map: Germany, Lithuania, Italy, and Spain. And the consortium is formed by 9 partners. Out of them, 3 are utilities, which will be responsible for developing the pilot projects with the support of the whole consortium, obviously. CREAR is the coordinator, and we have with us district heating from Lithuania, and 2 utilities, one from Italy, another one from Spain, Spain. There are also technical partners as the University of Geneva, etc. This project has a timeline of 3 years. It started in May 2019, last year. And during the first part of this year, we have already set up 4 national stakeholder platforms. These are networks of stakeholders who are crucial for the success of this project, because they provide us with feedback, they validate our results and our products, and they are continuously involved in the development of Runon Bill. For the second half of 2020, our main job will be to identify successful on-bill schemes for the replication in Europe. So if on-bill schemes have worked quite successfully in other countries like Canada or the US, now is the time to find models for our countries here in Europe. Next year, the idea will be to develop business models and supportive tools, such as software tools, to help utilities to launch this product among their client base. On 2021, we will be developing pilot on-bill schemes, pilot projects, and we will end the third year, 2022, with national roadmaps and European roadmaps with the aim of creating some impact in the European policy and national policies. Well, in this slide, you can find a typical representation of on-bill scheme. First of all, I have to say that there are many types of models with different relationships between these components, but one characteristic that is present in most of them is that the utility and the utility bill is at the cornerstone of the scheme. By this means, the utility bill, the energy utility will offer energy renovation services to its clients, the households, who will be paying back for those improvements in their homes through the energy bill. So, as I said before, an item, a repayment charge, will be added in each usually monthly bill. In addition, the utility bill can use their own funds or seek for a third-party financing, such a bank or an investment fund who can provide that capital for the project. There's also another possibility, is that instead of being the utility the one that undertakes directly the energy renovation, if the utility does not have that technical capability, then it can hire a contractor, an energy service provider, an installer to do that technology deployment. The last component in this scheme is the risk management, and this is related with the negotiation between the parties here on how to split the responsibility for achieving those savings, and what happens if with the risk of underperforming or not getting the expected amount of energy and economic savings. So, as I said before, there are several types of on-bill financial schemes. here we will just briefly introduce on-bill financing and on-bill repayment. But before that, let me also explain to you what is the golden rule, because it's a notion that regularly appears in this context. The golden rule applies when the savings achieved through the energy renovation project are higher than the costs that the utility had to had to face to implement the project. By this means, the end user will not suffer from a higher bill, because the savings will offset that cost, the cost of the investment. Now, as I said before, there are two main ways of putting in place these schemes. One is on-bill financing, or OBF. In this model, the utility uses its own capital, its own resources to implement the project. And in the other case, in the on-bill repayment, OBR, the upfront capital is provided by a third party. Each model has its advantages, disadvantages. The main difference is that only large utilities can go for an OBF, because small, medium utilities will not have the resources to do so. And that can also pose an advantage for the OBF systems. However, in the case of the OBR, there are several agents involved, and each intermediary can take its own cut on the margin. So it may turn out to be less profitable for the utility. The presence of several intermediaries maybe is less attractive for utilities in the case of OBR. Another disadvantage of the on-bill repayment is that if utility have to go to the bank, that liability, that debt, will show up in its balance sheet. Okay, now that we have went through the main theoretical part of the presentation, let me just briefly give you an idea of some results achieved during the activities of the project. One of the most interesting tasks that we developed was a series of interviews in its focus countries, and the interviews were about which are the key challenges or the main barriers for utilities. We interviewed in total around 50 stakeholders from different sectors, and this is what it came from that process. So for utilities, the key challenges are related with the need to have a special license or a permit to act as lenders. So usually it's not in the core business of the utilities to give credit, to lend money. Another difficulties reported by the stakeholders is the low interest rate environment, which limits the offer of OBS rates, and also the allocation of technical risk. This is related to what I said before, and the risk of not achieving the expected savings. Other issues are related to the fact that it's not always that the clients will ask utility to conduct an energy efficiency project. Sometimes the reference for the end user is other type of companies such as an escort, or even people from the black market that they can do that cheaper. Other utilities reported the need to adjust their operations to provide this service, and also the utility bill to add that item in the energy bill for their repayment of the energy services. There might be also a legal issue with the utility contract duration. In many countries, there's a limit of 1 year, and 1 year is the maximum time that a client must stay with certain utility for the energy services. For the energy supply. However, the energy efficiency projects usually take longer, and the payback period can be for 7 years, 8 years, 10 years. So how to differentiate that in the same contract can be challenging for utilities and can need that adaptation. Other challenges, but not all countries declare that, but is the problem of the collateral. It's difficult to set the collateral in this type of projects, like if the asset is the new windows or renovation of the facade, how would you take that out in case of default? And finally, of course, the default risk and its allocation. During the course of this project, we confronted these results from the stakeholders interviews with our own research, and we came with a summary of the principal challenges. Now, they can be divided into different categories: technical, financial, social, and legal. I will simply mention some of them. So from the technical standpoint, we can say that the energy renovation is a very fragmented market. So the knowledge is dispersed. It's difficult for an end user to acquire all the skills that he needs to hire the best contractor. And if those skills are ranging from engineering to architectural or even financial, are very difficult to find all together in the same provider. That is also related with the lack of capacity. In some countries like Germany, it's quite expensive to find those skills, and often the black market find a way to make profit on that, and it's not always beneficial for the reputation of these projects. Regarding financial issues, Jessica already commented the most common of them. Small opportunities, a small volume of investments are usually not attractive for financial institutions. That combined with long payback periods and high upfront costs provoke that renovation are not really happening at the pace that we would like to happen in Europe. This has not been also properly addressed through funding instrument, and that gives us the opportunity to find here a new way of dealing with this kind of project. From the social perspective, and I think also Jessica mentioned that the information and awareness, or better said, the lack of that, is one of the main challenges reported by the stakeholders in this project. in some countries, especially in those countries with mild climate, people tend to get used to some degree of discomfort, and they prefer to adopt alternative solutions, like in the case of facing a heating wave, they will open the windows and will not invest in expensive better insulation. Also, we are not always rational when we make our decisions, or as customers, we are many times biased by the present cash flows, or we have an irrational fear to new technologies, or in general to change. There are also legal challenges related to the long making decision process. It's difficult to put everybody in the same page and agree on undertaking this type of investments. I'm talking about meeting and getting the consensus among a community of neighbors. Also, in other countries, there's a significant lack of stable and legal framework to implement these projects. So why it's important to face these challenges? Because the potential of renovation is also big. In this table here, you can look at some numbers that give us an idea of the magnitude of the number of buildings that should be renovated in these countries. No, also it's very difficult. It's very different the situation of the bigger countries such as Germany, Italy, or Spain in comparison to Lithuania, much smaller country. But we can say that the potential for renovation in Germany is almost 8 million buildings, 5.5 for Italy, and near to 5 million buildings in Spain. Lithuania is 0.3 million buildings. Obviously, the amount of savings, of energy savings, is proportional to the number of buildings that should be renovated. It's also a constant in the four countries that there's a certain year which constitutes a turning point in the history of these countries from the efficiency perspective. No, so in the three bigger countries, between the late 70s and the early 80s, a stricter regulation came into force, and from them buildings started to be more efficient. So what is interesting is to take the buildings built before that, or in the 20 years before that regulation came into force. On the other hand, in Lithuania, that happened a bit later because it's more related with the collapse of the Soviet system. And that leads me to the last part of my presentation, which is related with the multiple benefits. This is a term that refers to benefits that goes beyond the obvious energy or economic savings that can be achieved through this type of projects. It's important to understand the dimension of these benefits to proper assess how profitable it is to invest in this type of projects. So maybe the most easy way to understand this is just looking at the increase in the dwelling value. That can lead to higher rents and an easier and quicker way to sell or to rent a house which has been improved from an energy standpoint. That it's also related with the increase in tenant satisfaction a tenant which house, the house that he lives in is more comfortable, will be less willing to look for a different house that will benefit at the end to the landlord, and that may help to mitigate the tenant dilemma. The tenant dilemma is a split incentive issue, and that happens when the landlord, which is the owner of the house, is not willing to invest in the property, because at the end of the day, he's not going to enjoy at the present time the improvements and the savings, while the tenant is not either willing to take that investment or to pay more for the improvement, because at the end it's not his own property. On a different category of multiple benefits is the healthy and the increase in the comfort of the indoor environment, increase in the thermal, noise, light comfort that will lead to improved safety, security, and health. The estimation here says that almost 10% of the European Union's population is not able to keep their homes adequately warm. That has an impact in our health and even in the expenditure of the health system. Another non-energy benefit that we can mention is the improvements in the sense of community, because putting in place this kind of projects require a lot of neighbors interaction. It also has been proof that the disposable income in the major economies increase. The estimation is between 10%, 30% of the annual home and travel energy cost is gained since 2000 thanks to energy efficiency projects. There are also other non-energy benefits, but they are a little bit far away from the scope of this project and this presentation, are more related with macroeconomic issues. The energy security will improve, reducing the reliance on fossil fuels or gas imports. A positive impact on job creation. And finally, productivity, thanks to a better, more comfortable office environment, can be also improved. With that, I finish my presentation. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Hi, everybody. My name is Kristina Klimovich, and I am a head of advisory and consulting business unit at Janney Finance. And it's a pleasure to be here today to talk about the EuroPACE project. But before we jump into the project itself, I would like to spend a couple of minutes really assessing the current crisis that we're facing. Indeed, we're living in completely unprecedented times. At the moment, we're spending nearly 100% of our time indoors. I'm doing this webinar, for instance, from my own home. And that really pushes us to also reconsider and redefine the role of buildings in today's crisis. So from what we're seeing, buildings are really serving as shelter, protecting the vulnerable groups. Also as workspace, with the majority of people working from home. And it's a space to learn and grow for our children, and there are nearly 7 to 9 million children in Europe. And of course, it remains a key space for family life. So it's more important than ever to talk about home renovation and putting energy efficiency, comfort and health of European citizens and their homes first. So over the past 2 months, we've really seen a lot of resilience and solidarity demonstrated by folks all over the world, and we've seen a number of recovery strategies being put forth by the governments. And it is our absolutely clear belief at Janney Finance that every one of these recovery strategies in the EU must fully rely on the EU Green Deal, which is really a roadmap for the clean energy transition and for a carbon neutral Europe in the future. It's only more important than ever to include the green transition into the recovery and to ensure that energy efficiency and home renovation as a whole is part of those recovery strategies. Because not only because of the tremendous job creation and economic opportunity, but also because we need to put European citizens first and really highlight the comfort, health, and well-being in the homes. So with that short introduction, I'll jump into the presentation itself. Janney Finance is a private company. We work with cities and regions to design and manage home renovation programs. We're involved in a number of Horizon 2020 projects that you can see on the right-hand side. And today I'll be speaking about one of them, about EuroPACE specifically. So having launched EuroPACE, we looked at the European home renovation market, and we devised our own home renovation formula that at the end of the day results in the trust to renovate and is poised to create a higher uptake in home renovation. And it's really composed of 3 key elements. And I believe this really connects to what both Jessica and Adriana said earlier about the barriers to home renovation. So home renovation is complicated, it's difficult. So technical assistance is absolutely key. And this involves coordination, advice, and making this very multi-stakeholder process simple for the homeowner. Then it's really access to financing. And here with EuroPACE, we intend to provide affordable and long-term financing that's accessible to most Europeans. And another very important element is smart funding, which really involves a risk-sharing facility and also blending public and private funds. And so altogether, these elements create this trust to renovate and increase a number of projects that we can complete and thus increase the renovation rate. And of course, that feeds in really well with the EU Green Deal strategy. A couple words about the project. So EuroPACE is a 3-year project. We just entered into the 3rd year. It's a collaboration of 8 different partners from 4 countries. To date, we've already assessed the market readiness of the EU countries, and we have deployed a pilot, a launch and actual pilot project in Spain. And right now, we're primarily focusing on making that pilot successful and scaling the EuroPACE mechanism across Europe. I'll go into each one of these elements in more detail now. So first off, looking at market readiness, as Jessica pointed out earlier, EuroPACE has been inspired by the PACE financing model that was very successful in the US and also spread across the globe quite a bit. And PACE financing is really a classical on-tax financing. What does that mean? That means that it's attached to a property and it's repaid with a regular tax bill in the US. It's a very common procedure. Everybody pays property taxes and pays them usually annually. And on those property taxes, there is an additional charge that relates to the PACE repayment. So we were very inspired by this model and by the success of this model that was able to generate more than 6 billion in financings in just over 5 years. So we decided to see how we can adapt this model to Europe. And one of the things that we definitely wanted to keep is this attachment or security by the property compared to the traditional unsecured loans. So our task was to create this link between the property and the financing in order to provide the investors with a lot of security and thus result in the lower cost of financing for the homeowners. So in order to put this structure in practice, we looked at several, actually EU 28 at the member states. And after conducting both legal and fiscal analysis, we ranked those member states and we selected countries that are most suitable for the EuroPACE implementation. After overlaying the market analysis of these countries, we further narrowed it down to just 4 countries. And those are Netherlands, Belgium, Portugal, and Spain to start with. And so it doesn't mean that other countries can not have an implementation of a EuroPACE project. It just means that given the current constraints of the project and our workload and our work packages, we selected 4 countries for the phase 1 application. So now I'll speak about the second pillar of the project, which is really about a pilot in Olot in Spain. There are several steps that we undertook to create the pilot. First of all, we established a legal basis, and for that, the city of Olot adopted a local ordinance. Then we established a public-private partnership between Janney Finance and the city of Olot, which resulted in a new operating entity being Fundació EuroPACE. Then we designed a financing platform and launched the program at the end of last year. The program is called Ola Domeless. I'll also mention it in more detail in the future. And right now we're focusing on developing a pipeline and positioning the program for future expansion. I'll say a few words about the managing entity, Fundació EuroPACE. There are a number of very important benefits for cities and regions for using this model that we designed. And the first one is there is no debt consolidation with the public budget. So that's quite an important element for the cities, and it provides this kind of risk mitigation. It separates the program from the city itself. Then there is an additional trust from the citizens, tax benefits, and of course a very clear and governance structure that provides for continuity. Additionally, this managing entity will be eligible to receive subsidies and grants as well. And there are a number of ways to tackle energy poverty using this private foundation. This is quite a complex graph, but it really intends to describe how a typical EuroPACE project would work in Spain. And I'll preface it by saying that it may not work exactly the same way in other European countries were to be adapted to them. So this is very specific to the current setup in Spain. And here I'll talk you through it. First of all, the homeowner is always in the center of the graph, because at the end of the day, it's all about providing the services and making the process easier, more reliable, and also more affordable for the homeowner. So the local program, or the One-Stop Shop, works together with the public authority and the investors by having signed together a framework agreement. Then the next step is for the local One-Stop Shop to really start working with the workforce, meaning with the contractors. So then the contractor trainings start so that we can verify and list a number of trusted contractors on the website. Then the local program can provide the technical assistance to the homeowner. And only after that, the contractor can actually start working with the homeowner on the project. So once the project is fully designed and developed and vetted by the program, then we start on the underwriting process and credit check. And this is when the financing partner is being activated. And so after that, the loan is secured by the property. via Nota Marginal, specifically in Spain. And then the next step is the project execution. And note here that the contractor is paid for the work by the financier and not by the homeowner. And then nearly the last step is the homeowner monthly repays the loan via direct deposit. So I know it's a bit of a complex scheme, but at the end of the day, the few things that should be taken away from it is really that the one-stop shop is an absolutely key structure in making this process smooth and as reliable as possible on the homeowner and the contractor side. So now let's jump into and actually look at the program itself. So HolaDomus program is has been launched in Catalonia, Spain, in the city of Olot, which is about 2-hour drive from Barcelona. It's a small municipality, but also very, very active on the sustainability side. And a couple of key elements that HolaDomus program brings together is this technical support, affordable financing, and smart funding. So we've developed a tailored facility specifically for such long-term loans in order to address one of the largest barriers to home renovation. And we use the EuroPACE Foundation of Fundació EuroPACE as a managing entity. And we're working very closely with local contractors to create a social impact in the community. You can visit the program's page on holadomus.com. At the moment, it is in Catalan, but maybe Google Translate can help you get a sense of some of the elements that we'll list on the page. And those really are access to trusted contractors, affordable financing, technical support, and providing that simplicity and support throughout the whole renovation journey. This is also an important issue. What can the program fund? An essential answer is a variety of technologies that can save and produce energy. So it's a number of energy efficiency technologies, renewable energy, but also some of the accessibility as measures as well. We've conducted a marketing and outreach campaign, which focused on both citizens and the contractors. For the citizens, some of the key elements, and that's building also on Adriana's point about the so-called multiple benefits, or the people-centered benefits that focus on health, improvements in health, well-being, comfort, and in some cases even productivity at the moment when everybody's working from home is very important. We also highlighted the savings and affordability of the program as well. While for the contractors, the key messages were really their ability to grow their business and to complete larger projects and faster. There are a couple of simple steps in a typical project completion through the HolaDomus project. It all starts with an initial assessment or essentially an energy diagnosis. Then we proceed to a technical solution. Only after the project is fully designed, we do engage on the financing side. And after project execution and verification by the program, the repayment process starts. And this is an actual picture of the HolaDomus staff. And a couple words about the financing as well. So the type of loan, it is a home renovation loan secured by a notary deed. The loan size can vary quite a bit from 5 to 100,000 in residential properties. And the average size is 20,000 euros for multifamily buildings and 20,000 euros for single family and yeah, apologies for that. And for multifamily, the duration is from 5 to 15 years, and it is affordable financing, certainly depending on a credit assessment. And the typical monthly installments or repayments can start at just 39 euros. Another important element of the EuroPACE program is its ability to address energy poverty and support the vulnerable groups. One of the elements that we put in place is the Social Guarantee Fund, which is really a risk-sharing facility that allows us to provide affordable loans to vulnerable groups. and it is a fund that has been established jointly by Janney Finance and the city of Ola, which invested in the fund and made the additional investment, and the fund will be managed by the program managing entity. Additionally, I should mention that at the moment we're starting a test of an incentive package containing both finance and subsidies for 15 energy poor families in Ola. So hopefully in a couple months or in half a year, we'll be able to share more insights on that as well. I should mention both direct and indirect job creation as well, and retraining of vulnerable groups, so folks who have been out of work to join the contractors pool as well. So altogether, as a summary, what EuroPACE project does, the goal is to create an effective program that creates the value for homeowners, value for the city, and for the investors as well. And it's fully in line with the EU Green Deal, and we believe that the program will boost the renovation wave and create a larger number of projects by bringing together this effective program design, structuring of the one-stop shop, engaging the local sales force in terms of contracted trainings and verification, and then providing affordable and smart financing, various trainings to contractors, taking advantage of the digital tools, and lastly, addressing the energy poverty issue. So today I also wanted to mention that we're looking for cities from Belgium, the Netherlands, Portugal, and Spain to participate in the project, and really to see how this mechanism can potentially be adapted to their local cities. We already have quite a bit of interest from all these countries, and we're intending at the end of the project to select up to 4 leader cities to join us on this journey. So thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to your questions.
Great, thank you both so much for your presentations. So at this point, we can head into a Q&A. So if people have questions, they can feel free to type them into the question box, and we'll go through them, and you can either address them at both speakers or one individual speaker, and we can get started. So I do have one question to start. So I think we covered quite a bit, and so thank you both very much. Both projects are in very different phases of implementation and development. And Christina, you mentioned you're looking for new cities to replicate EuroPACE in. So what is could you explain a bit of the process for replication outside of Spain and what that would look like?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for the question. So the first step for us would be to establish a local city working group, essentially composed of folks from the financing, the legal, and the building renovation departments to really figure out how can we find a way to attach such financing to a property, and also to have a discussion about the one-stop shop design and development. And then after having created the city working group, we would suggest having 1 or 2 workshops in person if possible, and for the time being, of course, online. And then at the result of this process, Janney Finance would produce recommendations and suggestions for how to move forward. So essentially, it's a very well-defined process, and very much within the time frame of 3 to 4 months time.
Great, thank you very much for that. Okay, so I'm going to field some of the questions coming in. Are these projects only applicable for residential projects for renovation, or also for new building construction?
I'll jump in since I was already speaking. So on the EuroPACE side, the model itself could potentially be applied to outside of the renovation, outside of the residential sector. However, the EuroPACE project is only focused on residential buildings. At the time of the application for this project, we really identified that residential buildings were in a dire need of renovation. This was really the most underserved sector, so we focused on homes and apartments.
Great.
Same thing for Runon Bill. It's, at this moment, it's only for residential sector and not for new buildings, but for already existing ones.
Terrific, thank you. So another question that came through is, given that a fee might be a fee that might be lower than what is attained by the energy savings, if it's not lower, then what is the incentive for the building owner? So basically, what happens if the obtained savings are not higher than the fee?
I understand that this is for me. In that case, well, depending on how the contract was stipulated, but this risk can be taken by the utility. So the product is still attractive for the end user because it's not gonna have to be at a higher cost, and the utility can also address that risk through a third party. Maybe it's the ESCO who is implementing the project, who has to take that risk, because at the end, the constructor, the ESCO, the technology provider is the expert who can certify that that savings, those savings.
Great, thank you. And then there's a couple questions here about how the energy savings are assessed. So is it largely based on energy performance certificates? Is there a post-project verification? Both of you or either of you elaborate on that?
I can start saying how we're doing this under the EuroPACE project, but I'll also note that in every one of the cases that EuroPACE is adapted to a new location, this process can be modified and added and specifically adapted to the needs and to the types of buildings. So usually the local program assesses the project and verifies the project at its completion time. And then every so often after the project is done, the program will follow up with the homeowner to ensure that everything is functioning properly. We are definitely looking into having more robust data sharing from homeowners. However, there are a number of privacy and other types of issues that we weren't able to yet implement in our pilot, but we're certainly thinking about these elements.
Great. And then we've got a few questions here about the tenant-landlord split, so the split incentive. So how would the owner and rental mix work? How would it be affected by the on-bill scheme, and what happens if you sell your house?
This is a very good question, because that can vary depending on the model, and there are a lot of possibilities here. So the contract can be tied to the meter, for example, to the energy meter. In that case, if you sell a house, or if there's another occupant of the house, the debt is also transferred into that new person. The other possibility is that the debt is related to a specific person, and you cannot transfer that. And as the person who asked correctly said, that has an impact or is very related with the tenant dilemma, because if homeowners cannot transfer this debt to their tenants, they will be less prompt to undertake this kind of investments. And also in the case of the tenants, it can be a disadvantage if they are tied to this debt forever and they cannot leave the house. So there are many possibilities. And there are examples in North America for one and other case.
If I can add something, the on-bill repayment is on the tenant of the building. So in order to solve the split incentive dilemma, there could be agreements between the owner and the tenant to split some of the energy costs, and this should be in the contract of in the rental contract. And also there are examples in the US in which, in order to limit the amount of money that the tenant has to pay every month, the building owner injects some cash in the investment at the beginning of the project, so that the monthly payment, let's say, in the utility bill is less. And there is a way to share. In general, research shows that the best way to split the tenant owner dilemma is to somehow share the energy costs of the building, and this can be done mainly in the rental contract outside of the on-bill arrangement. Let's say it's a general problem.
Great, thank you for that. And now I have a very practical question for EuroPACE, for Christina. How do you find the potential cities? Is it through the Department of Energy, or is there a public announcement for applying?
Actually, we've been very lucky that most of the cities reached out to us through webinars like this and through European events that we were able to be part of. So for us, we've been just very lucky in that sense. And of course, we've had an outreach strategy through Twitter and newsletter, and we're in touch with Energy Cities, Euro Cities, and the Covenant of Mayors as well.
Great, thank you. And now we have a question about building appliances. So how are building appliances energy efficiency included in the financing model? Are those taken into consideration, or is this largely really based on full building home renovations?
So you mean the building appliances, if they are included?
Yes, exactly, yes.
If it is one of the possible measures, renovating the building appliances? Well, at this point, we are open to that. We are targeting more deep renovation of the buildings, but since the project just started this year, the type of measures is still being decided.
Great. We've got a lot of questions, so this is good. I'm just sifting through them. So if you both could answer, or one of you, what are the main advantages to on-bill schemes in comparison to other financial mechanisms?
I can answer because it's not related to on-bill.
Yes.
So the main advantage is that the upfront cost has not have to be beared, has not an impact on the final user. Why? Because he can repay in each monthly bill the cost of the energy project.
Great, thank you. And now I have a question about scale. So of course, reaching scale is very important here, and we've got quite an insightful comment regarding COVID. So before COVID-19, financing experts were told that the problem was not access to financing, that the money was available, but the problem was to aggregate projects that can be attractive to financial institutions, and therefore to be able to stimulate enough demand from the side of the building owners. Do you think that COVID will change this situation?
I think I'll start talking, and maybe Adriana can add to that later. On my side, I think it's incredibly interesting, these times that we're living in, and how the energy efficiency sector will adapt, and how home renovation programs may change due to COVID. What we're seeing is certainly is a positive trend in terms of making one-stop shops even more reliable, and even more easier for people to obtain financing, and easier for people to renovate their homes. So essentially everything is being digitized, and we're working on minimizing kind of that number of visits to a home. But overall, I would say the challenges remain, it's complexity of the project, and it's access to financing. And we're able to solve that with EuroPACE project on both sides, by creating an effective one-stop shop and also affordable financing. Hopefully we'll start, we'll start reconnecting again with the homeowners after the COVID crisis is over.
Yeah, definitely. It's a very good point. It'll be very interesting to see how things play out. And Christina, you had a very good point at the beginning of your presentation about the effect of COVID, and how important our homes are during this time. I mean, always, but this is a constant reminder. We have another practical question, Christina, for you. Someone from Portugal is interested and wondering if they can post on Twitter that you're looking for Portuguese cities.
Absolutely. We're always looking for cities. There's some interest from Portugal that we have already. And in fact, we're in conversations with them, but there's always an opportunity to discuss more. And there's always an opportunity to combine those efforts, because at the end of the day, it's all about creating a higher impact across European countries.
Terrific. Yeah, definitely. I'd say the more the merrier of posting. So now we have a question about financial institutions. So what kind of financial institutions are interested in this form of financing? What has been the appetite?
It can be diversification of products. Can be the fact that they have direct access to a database of clients with their credit record. This is another advantage, by the way. So the default risk is significantly lower when you know the history record of a client. If he has been paying the energy bill for years, it is very unlikely that he stopped paying for the energy renovation. That's just to mention a few.
Great, thank you. And now a question about smart metering. Could you speak a bit to the role of metering and smart metering infrastructure and their role in these programs? Do you see these only being applicable where smart meters have been rolled out?
In the case of Runon Bill, from the technical standpoint, smart meters can have a very important role since they will help to determine the amount of savings achieved. And for the stipulation of the contracts and how those are being functioning, it's important. And for the split of the risks that we mentioned before.
Terrific. Let's see. So in terms of choice regarding utilities, does RenOnBill cover the freedom of choice between utilities, and how is that handled if people are switching energy providers?
So in principle, that can be seen as a downside, like because as I said, you can only have a client for 1 year tied to a contract for energy supply. However, what we have seen and what we were told during the stakeholders interviews is that this kind of projects are already in place with a lot of differences, but for small appliances, for example. And in practice, you can have 2 separate contracts or the same contract, but that one part is extinct if the client wants to switch provider, and the other part of the contract, the one that is related to the energy renovation, is still going on for the time that the project is in implementation.
Great, thank you. Let's see, we've covered this one a bit, but if, Christina, if you could maybe reiterate one more time the quality control mechanisms or requirements for the technical project or the contractor selection in the EuroPACE project.
Sure. The contractor selection really has a number of steps. First of all, we train contractors on the main steps of the program, so they're very well aware of what we offer, what we don't offer. Contractors at the end of that training also have to sign the consumer protection guidelines that really outline how they interact with customers. It covers communications elements. It also covers other risks. Then the contractors, each firm is evaluated both financially and in terms of their quality of their works. And only after that, the OneStop Shop has verified that contractor, and then he or she can be part of our contractor database. So that's in terms of contractor training, and we really based it on a number of successful home renovation programs both in Europe and in the US. And then once the project is completed, the One-Stop Shop technical staff also verifies the completion of the project. And after the sign off from the homeowner and the technician from the One-Stop Shop, then the contractor can finally get paid, essentially.
Great, thank you. Okay, so I think that's it for questions. Unless anyone else, we can wait another couple of seconds in case people have more questions. But I want to thank you both. Are there any final comments that either of you have that you want to share regarding either of the projects?
The only, sorry, I'll start. The only comment I would say is that we're now entering in our 3rd year, and we're very excited to actually be able to adapt this model outside of Spain. And we're also starting to think about EuroPACE 2.0. So I'm always looking forward to new ideas and new inquiries from the public sector. So that's it. Please basically get in touch.
Terrific. And we actually do, Adriana, before we turn to you, we do have one more question. How are large-scale social housing providers, for example, local authorities, engaged and facilitated? How do you ensure that the most impactful and cost-effective measures are selected?
Well, in this precise moment, we are building that model, this prototype model, through kind of a workshop, and we are deciding which is the best target for or the best segment of the market for our product, and specifically large communities of homeowners, social homeowners, social agents that they have the property of a large amount of buildings can be part of this model. So of course, as long as there's one person that is taking the decision for several units, it will simplify the decision-making process, and it will help to develop the renovation project.
Great, thank you. So that's it for new questions. So sorry, Adriana, I cut you off before. So if we have any more final comments, please go ahead.
Well, yes, as I said, we are in the first years of our project, so we are just developing the first models, and in this moment, it is also appreciated your comments, your feedback. If you want to join our network, we are still on time to do so. So feel free to contact me to discuss it and on further issues.
Terrific. Again, thank you all for joining today, and thank you, Adriana and Christina, for presenting. I think that's it. We can close it there.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Bye.